Again, welcome each and every one of you, regardless of your tradition, where you come from. The faith story of this place is part of the story of Coolgardie. It's a story we're very, very proud of. And many of these stories are worth exploring, even like the story we just heard. Exploring with some of the Year 9s during the week at the college about how there's different layers in text, and this gospel is no exception. For instance, just recognizing that a denarii is about a day's wage. So 100 denarii, it's like, this might be $10,000, $20,000, or this was significant. But a talent would have been almost like $1 million. One talent, to remember the story of the servant given one talent, that was a fortune. This person's given 10,000. How can he repay 10,000 talents? Forgiveness is not just important for us, it's necessary, it's an imperative. All of us in our lives at some point have been hurt, insulted, bullied, betrayed. And most of us, in some level, carry around some kind of hurt or anger about that. There's a bitterness about certain experiences, resentments, and often we carry that far too much of it for far too long. And it literally, the doctors will say, literally carrying that kind of emotion in you, those thoughts and feelings, actually can make our bodies sick. It's like, this is something that is important just on a physical level. Like, our bodies get sick when we carry too much of this. And isn't it funny that the person we're like, I just don't want anything to do with this person, I don't want to think about them anymore, they end up being the person that actually ends up in our minds more than we want. They keep coming back into there. I want to think about them. They keep turning up in my thoughts. No matter where I go, this person I want to cut connections with, actually there's this connection I still have with them while I carry that hurt and resentment. It actually is this like iron cord tying me to them, which is quite ironic, isn't it? And we often don't want or don't forgive because we feel like I'm going to have to trust this person again. Or maybe if I forgive them, I'm going to have to somehow ignore what they've done. I have to forget what has happened. You know that old saying, forgive and forget? But brothers and sisters, God doesn't demand of something of us that isn't possible, especially when He's designed us with brains that sometimes lock in some of these experiences, right? These painful experiences, our brain kind of goes, yes, attack from a tiger, locking it in. Bad cooking, locking that in. And our brains are designed to remember, hurtful experiences, and so God's not asking us to do the impossible, to forget something which sometimes we can't. It may not always be possible to trust a person again, to put Humpty Dumpty back together, to reconcile a relationship that has been perhaps deeply betrayed. But our readings today are saying that we must always forgive that debt of injustice that has been done to us. To forgive that sense that somehow they owe us. Even the banks call it forgiving a debt, right? That sense that somehow they've got to make this up to you. I have to let that go. And Jesus himself will teach us in the Lord's Prayer itself that our petition to God for forgiveness of our sins will not be heard unless we have first forgiven our neighbour. Remarkable, isn't it? But it makes sense, for you who are parents, Your kids are fighting, you want them to apologise and forgive each other before you let them off the hook for disturbing the rest of the household. You kind of almost say, well, we'll go back to peacetime, but first of all, you guys need to sort this out. It's almost like God our Father sees that and treats us with that same calling us to grow up in our family life. Even the Catechism will teach it very powerfully this way. Listen to these words of number 2840 in the Catechism on the Our Father. It says that the outpouring of mercy cannot penetrate our hearts as long as we have not forgiven those who have trespassed against us. Powerful words. God's mercy can't penetrate our hearts. St. John will put it in the scriptures, how can we love the God that we cannot see if we do not love the God we can see? So we see just how important this is, but what if I struggle to forgive? What if I'm sitting here this morning going, yes, part of me wants to forgive, but I struggle with this. Sometimes I find I can't do it. On a practical level, I would say sometimes the first and most important step is overlooked. I think that first step is going back to thinking about like a bank. When a bank forgives a debt, they need to go through the accounts and realize what exactly it is that needs to be forgiven. If you go to a doctor and you're hurting, in seminary training for priesthood, sometimes I come in, twisted ankle, sore hammy, back, shoulders, they're all sore. If I go and just say I'm hurting, that's not going to help the physician. He's not going to ask where, how, what happened. So I need to also, in a way, go through that account and realize, how have I been hurt specifically? What instances? What occasions? So that there's no kind of hidden accounts. Otherwise, if we just do that generally, I forgive them, somehow, deep down I still know, yeah, but you still owe me. I still haven't moved beyond, because I haven't actually recognised and brought into the light all those wounds that needed letting go of. And now, whilst sitting down and talking to the person about all of that stuff would be amazing. I mean, that would be ideal, right? And very healing to be able to share with that person what we have experienced in our life. But it may not always be good. I recognise that. It may not always be safe, even, or possible to do so. But this is very important. The incredible truth that we can take away today is this, is that it is always possible to forgive our neighbour on our own, from our heart. To forgive them each time that sorrow, maybe even that resentment and anger arises, to make that decision. I'm going to forgive that offence. And it may rise again tomorrow. I may need to forgive that again tomorrow. And it may arise 7 times or 77 times. But in doing so, I offer a gift of generous mercy and love, because this is exactly what Jesus has done for my 10,000 talents of sins. Your 10,000 talent of debt. He has forgiven that and asked that we release those few denarii that is owed to us. And finally, let's just remember as well that we can often misdiagnose the intentions of others. It's deeply true that hurt people hurt people. The person hurting us is almost always, I've almost never found an exception, often doing it out of their own hurt and brokenness that they themselves carry. And so, as our scriptures today invite us to face sometimes those excruciating experiences, those Calvaries of our hearts, let's realize that we will find Christ there too, even in our own Calvary. When we're on the cross, he's on the cross next to us. We hear him say, Father, forgive them. Father, heal them. Save them. They do not know what they do. And if we follow his example and path in our own Calvaries, then like Christ, we soon too will rise to a new life, in a new freedom. This is the secret freedom of the gospel. It is good news. It is that healing and that transformation for our lives that's truly the freedom that our hearts long for. Praise be Jesus.